to engage in their job so you can do your job. There seems to be a large disconnect. Not sure what's going on, but somebody standing by who does, I think, know what's going on. He is a leadership expert. He is the author of the book, Motivational Interviewing for Leadership. His name is Jason Wilcox, and he joins us now to talk about this phenomena that maybe has been around for a while, but seems to be rearing its ugly head again. And Jason Wilcox, how are you on this glorious Tuesday?
I'm doing great, Ken. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad you're here. I've worked with people that just did not want to do their job. They were there. And some days you couldn't find them anywhere, and some days they might come in, do a little this, do a little that, take the long lunch break. It's not a new phenomenon, but it seems to be, again, something that's a real problem. People just checking out at work. Why does that go on? Is it human nature, or is there something going on with the way that particular company could be run?
Well, there's definitely a lot of complexities to employee engagement in the first place, and depending on the individual, the organization, the mission, and as well as the leader. Depending on which area you're looking at, normally I look at the leadership and how they impact the employee. There's a lot of things that could be going on, from a leader not engaging the employee and finding ways for them to connect to the work and find where their strengths and values are that engage in what they're looking to do. From the person not really feeling connected to the mission or feeling like they are part of what's happening, like they have ownership of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, I get all that. I like the idea that you have to look at the person that's actually running the place before you can figure out what's going on with the people that he or she has employed. But it used to be, and again, I don't want to go back to the good old days, but it used to be, we'll pay you this amount of money, you give me this amount of work, and everybody goes home happy. That doesn't seem to exist very much anymore, does it?
I think what you were finding back then was a situation where people felt like they were part of something, right? Yeah, they would get a paycheck and they would go there, but they felt a value or a pride of what they were doing and being part of the economy and the workforce wherever they were working. Mm-hmm. And so nowadays, do we have that? And in some organizations, there may not feel that value or that importance at that workplace.
Well, that goes back to the person that's running the place and the quote-unquote culture that he or she sets. Not every person that runs a company is cut out for that job. Not every person who runs a company is a leader. Some people just get promoted because maybe they're in sales and they brought in an inordinate amount of money, and so they're rewarded by the board or whomever owns the company. But just because you're in the corner suite, in the C-suite, does not necessarily mean that you're a good leader. And so that could be, at least for what we're talking about here, one of the root causes of the problem.
Absolutely. Sometimes people get hired into leadership positions because they're really great at that frontline job. So maybe they're really great at sales and know how to make sales. But being a leader is a whole nother new skill set. And if you're the individual that knows how to push sales and you're the one that knows how to make things happen in that sphere, it doesn't mean that you know how to help others do that. And that's going to be the key, is switching gears from one skill set to a new one to make sure that you're empowering and creating success for your employees versus success for you. And that's going to make a big difference in the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I've been, in meetings with the people that I answer to, and I would always hear this invariably: I need you to be more of a leader. And I said, okay, well, I'll be more of a leader. Where exactly am I leading these people? Because I don't feel like you're leading me anywhere. Of course, that never went over well, but it invariably was the case, particularly in the job, in the profession I was in for 45 years, which was television news. And television news, the hierarchy of that particular business is rampant with people in quote-unquote leadership roles that simply just kissed the right butt, made the most money, and all of a sudden now they're in charge of a staff of 150, 200 people. So when you say to an employee, I want you to lead, the employee has to say one of two things. Great, I like what you're doing. I'll pick up the mantra and run with it. Or they say, invariably in my case, well, where are we going? What's the destination? We have all of these things we want to be, but where is it all leading us to? And so I think inside of a company, communication becomes paramount. If you want somebody to work full focused and buy into what you're doing, I think communication is paramount. You have to deliver that message before the message can be received. And I think that's a problem at some places. Certainly was in a lot of places I work. Maybe it was just me. I don't know, Jason. But I think it's in a lot of places it's a problem.
Oh, yeah. You're hitting on one of the things that they're finding in the data is the fact that if you don't have clarity on expectation, mission, and objectives from leadership, it's very difficult to get behind the wheel. So what we're identifying, kind of like what we identify in our MI Lead program or on our miforleaders.com website, we look into identifying how do you engage. And there's two elements. One of them you're identifying. The big element is there that clarity of the expectations, the objectives, and mission. And two, are you then, after you make all that clear and that communication happening, then do you explore for the employee how to connect their solutions, their ideas, their problem solving, the issues they see in front of them? Are you connecting their thoughts and ideas into it to help drive it, move it forward? And those are two big areas that leaders often drop and fall flat on.
Is this a generational thing? Maybe that there's some sort of line of demarcation, whether it's Gen Y to Gen Z, Gen X to Gen Y, or whatever it may be. It seems to me that as you get younger in this study, you tend to find it to be more of a problem, and that maybe it's focus, maybe it's a distracted lifestyle that everyone has. Maybe the phone is an issue and people can't keep the phone down. But it seems to me, at least anecdotally, that it's more of a problem for the younger set as it is for the people that are 45 and older. Right, wrong on that? What do you think?
Potentially, there's some data that shows, there's those impacts between each different generation. But there is a connection between all of the generations on engagement. And what we're seeing with all the generations goes back to what we talked about a minute ago, communication, everything. But going back to what you're saying, right, the newer, younger generation, there's a reality that they're ready to get there, right, get to the point, make it happen. And so finding a way as a leader to connect into that energy that they're ready to make happen is going to be really important. And so, giving them tasks that are not things that are moving things forward, or they don't see how it makes a difference within the organization and what's happening, can be a very disengaging thing for that generation.
Yeah. The buy-in is the key here. What do you hear? You coach a lot of. I'm sure you coach a lot of executives. I'm sure that they've read your book and this and that. Do people that run these companies actually believe that there's a problem, or that they don't give a rat's rear end as long as the P&L statement looks good every month? What's the reaction from where this problem seems to be emanating from?
It seems that most people do care. They want to see, the bottom line. Obviously, they want to get there. And they care about making sure that we do get there. The problem I often see is the disconnect of not understanding the reality of, but I hired them, I'm paying them, they're here and they should be doing the job, to recognizing there's a whole lot more to it, to getting the person actually engaged in the job and owning their work and driving things forward.
Yeah, see, that would be, that to me is where the rub is. If you run a company, right, and you're going to hire somebody, you're not just going to hire the first guy that walks in, first woman that walks in. You're going to do a deep dive into qualifications. How can they help this company move forward, this and that and whatnot. So you have to go through that process. And then there's probably a training process. When you get that employee in, you've got to train that employee as to exactly what the job is, regardless of the disciplines of the job. And that takes some time. So let's just say from the start of search to fully trained employee, you're 8 to 9 months down the road. If that employee isn't engaged for, if he or she loses interest in another 6 months, all of a sudden you're back into this cycle where every 18 months you're looking for somebody. And, again, the younger crowd, the under 45 crowd, I think they're more interested in what's the interest here for me, and I don't want my job to interfere too much with my personal life. And I think if the corner suite, the C-suite, would put more work into it, we might not have this problem with disengagement. Now, I've never run an office. I've never been an executive, but it seems to me if they buy into the fact that there is work that goes on as opposed to just hiring somebody and say, we'll pay you every 2 weeks, you and I might not have to have this conversation. Hell, Jason, you could be out of business if it was a little more,
there you go.
A little more effort put into the corner suite, right?
And that would be the dream for the employees, right? That there is no need for the work that I do, that they are being engaged, that people are identifying their values and strengths and pulling them into the work and really driving that forward. Absolutely.
Jason Wilcott's our guest, the author of the book, Motivational Interviewing for Leadership. He is a licensed clinical social worker and behavioral health specialist. So anyway, so you got that problem, whether you identify it as an employee or not, or you're an employer that has a problem with keeping everybody focused and not have these zombie workers that are just there and what's the end? What's the end game here? How can an employer do that? What do you do besides a lot of the trivial stuff that we see companies do, games and role playing and all that nonsense? What do you do so that it's a serious effort and you're not just viewed as somebody trying to get a quick fix? What happens? What do you do? How do you advise somebody to pick up that ball?
Well, it's always going to understanding what creates engagement, and then secondly, moving that into the individual. Do you look for opportunities for them to grow? Do you have stretch projects? Is there programs that they're interested in that they could take the reins on? There are things that need some fixing, and you can assign to an employee to look into it and to evaluate and to find a path forward. All those things are going to start pulling that employee in, and you're going to start finding ways that employee wants to contribute to the organization.
Yeah. Well, that may be the key. Hopefully it's the goal, but there certainly is going to have to be a re-educational process. There's no question about it. Your website is miforleaders.com, and it's the letter M, the letter I, and then forleaders.com. That's where folks can find you, and my guess is that leads you directly to your book, correct?
That is correct. And it's identified. This impacts the bottom line if we get them engaged or not engaged.
Yep, and that's a tune that I think anybody running a company ought to be whistling. The bottom line. Thank you. We appreciate it, Jason. Stay well.
Thank you, Ken. Bye.
Yep.